So I'm going to put you in the hot seat first, Tony. Talk to us about the Ayala Foundation. When you and I have been getting to know each other over these past couple of days, you've talked a lot about the need to be strategic in the thinking, but also making sure that you maybe even reorganize the philanthropy to help execute. So talk to us about your big bets and talk to us about how you're achieving those big bets.
Thanks, Shamina. So the Ayala Foundation is around 65 years old, but it's shifted its focus areas a little bit through the years. And when I joined a few years ago, I was asked to lead a strategy refresh. And in order to do that, we consulted our stakeholders, especially the communities we work with, to ask them what is of value in any of the stuff that we do. We also consulted our partners to find out what do you think we're good at, which is different maybe from what we think we're good at. And we also asked, of course, the national government and the academics, what does the country need, right? And so looking at this as a Venn diagram, we placed our strategy refresh sort of in the center of that, right, where the circles overlap. And we subjected, based on that, all our programs to a cost-benefit analysis. And after that, we looked at which ones produce the largest social benefit for every peso or dollar that you put in. And with a little bit of judgment overlaid, we cut down our programs from more than 25 to just 12. Yeah, so that's where we made our big bets. The stuff that our stakeholders told us is of value, where the country's pain points were, and also where we thought we could make a contribution.
That's pretty, you say it so kindly, but that's pretty hard stuff when you're walking into a position, you know, as big as the Ayala Foundation and having to, you know, as we heard from the last speaker, sort of navigate the family and navigate all the priorities that combine country, community. It's a lot to navigate. And so, I want to come back to this with you because I think I want to get even more specific about what that meant for your programs. But let me just jump to Hari quickly. Hari, welcome to the stage. Thank you so much for coming. You know, at Gates, we often hear about the amount of capital. I mean, it's such a generous foundation. How do you think about catalytic capital in that conversation? And when do you use it to de-risk commercial benefit rather than simply provide grants? How do you prioritize?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Shamina, and thanks to Mastercard for pulling together such a fantastic day. So you're right that when you think of the Gates Foundation, maybe you think it's a lot of money. You know, we spend almost $9 billion every year. But for the scale and magnitude of the problems that we're trying to solve, that's actually a tiny bit. So there's absolutely no way you're going to have meaningful impact if you go it alone. So what you said, catalytic leverage capital, that's really the only way to think of sustainable impact. And I think we are a 25-year-old foundation, so not too old, but we've been around. And what we've learned over the last couple of decades is ways to find those points of leverage and deploy our funding in a manner that unlocks capital, whether from the commercial sector or also from multilateral development banks and governments. So a couple of examples where I think we've done a reasonable job. One is, vaccine manufacturing. We've been one of the biggest contributors to the development of a global vaccines market that is both affordable and that allows countries to not have to break the bank to provide essential vaccines for countries. So how we did that, a few ways. One is, by providing volume guarantees for manufacturers so they could hit price points before, you really deploy large-scale resources. So almost underwriting, if you don't get to a certain volume at so-and-so price, we'll help make the difference. And we've really not had to dip into that volume guarantee in too many instances because we found that, once that assurance was provided, companies were willing to invest and, the volumes help pay for themselves. Similar thing we're doing now on family planning, working with Pfizer to help develop a self-injectable contraceptive, where again, we've provided investment for product development, for ramping up manufacturing, and the volume guarantee, which again is now turned into a sustainable business. So much so, there's now space for 2 additional manufacturers, one from India, one from Bangladesh, to come in because the global market is really shaping up well. A third example, I'd say, is what we did with bKash in Bangladesh. bKash is one of the largest digital payment providers, and we came in as an early funder. We put in some equity investments through our strategic investment funds, alongside a little bit of grant money to help bKash refine their product offerings for the segments that they were working on. And that helped them have a really strong go-to-market product. And then in subsequent rounds, they got money from SoftBank, Alipay, and we were actually able to make an exit from that investment. So if we don't think of ways that we can do this, grease the wheels for others to come in, because you think of it, philanthropy is really the purest form of risk capital, but it's not the biggest pool of capital that's out there. So unless philanthropy thinks of ways to bring in those bigger pools and make it worth their while, whether it's commercial capital or development finance, it's very unlikely that you'll have large-scale impact. I'll finish by saying one problem we are currently trying to work on, where we really need commercial partners to come in if things are to succeed, is the reinvent the toilet challenge. You've probably heard about it and seen those videos of Bill Gates drinking poop water and the like. So the idea there is to come up with modern toilets that are really appliances that can be off the grid, not require connections to sewer sanitation, not require power, and can really capture, treat, and deal with human waste on site. So we are talking to entities like Samsung, who are really good with appliances, Lixil, to see if they can develop products that will actually be commercially viable. And there again, we've invested for the last 15 years. We've got some prototypes that are looking promising, and hopefully in the next few years, some of that will actually go to market.
I think that's going to come from social enterprises. I think that's where you really get the innovation is from the ground, when you're trying to think about solving these problems, but from the ground up, not necessarily from the top down. And Karen, that's where you come in. You've been backing social enterprises for a long time through your foundation. Talk to us about how you prioritize, and where are you seeing the green shoots? Where are you seeing the trends?
Thank you, Shamina. Essentially, the DBS Foundation is probably the youngest foundation of the 3 here. So we are 11 years old. When we first started in 2014, we explicitly set up to actually look for businesses that are purpose-driven, because DBS as a bank is also purpose-driven. So we think, it's about what can we do to affect, positively real people, real businesses, real lives. And so looking at it, we say, how can businesses be looking for innovative solutions to actually solve today's problems? And that's when the board decided on let's kind of put our backing and monies behind social enterprises. That was pretty much, I guess, during the first 8 years or so. And then COVID came along. And that's when we realized that, number one, we need to do more for our role to kind of benefit society. So the bank then upsized our commitment to give back to $1 billion over the next 10 years. So whilst we still continue to support innovative businesses, be it now social enterprises as well as SMEs. And I think we heard earlier on during one of your data drops that SMEs and MSMEs are the lifeblood of any country, from an employment point of view, from a GDP point of view. And I think that's where innovation is needed the most. And so we're supporting social enterprises, but we're also partnering governments, public sector partners, other foundations to really address some real problems facing society today. So given life is so uncertain, so we said that, how do we take out some of those uncertainties by just going back to basics, providing essential needs, food, shelter, housing. And then with some of those worries being taken away, then how then do we enable people to survive and thrive in today's economy? So early on, I think, it was mentioned that 85% of people are unbanked in this region. Many are digitally illiterate. So as a bank, this is why we also support fostering financial inclusion, because that's where our skill sets are and strengths are. So we're looking to partner, to collaborate, because we feel that philanthropy isn't just about giving back. It's actually working together to build forward. And that's what we'd like to do.
You know, I think that just this first round of the question and answer, it's so important because I think what you're hearing, I think, or at least what I'm hearing is, you know, you've got the Gates Foundation, $9 billion a year. You've got DBS saying we're committing $1 billion over the next 10. You have the Ayala Foundation, a family foundation, talking about the changes they made structurally. I think that's, for me, that's an example of what I think is really important about how we do this work, which is you recognize the assets of where you are and where you're sitting, and you do the work to leverage those assets in the right way. So you're hearing each of these leaders talk about how they think about their work, not necessarily from a generic philanthropy point of view, but from the place of where they sit with their assets, whether it's capital, whether it's bank accounts, whether it's private, public, social. So I think that's a very good way of thinking about this. I'm going to push you all, though, to, you know, as we get closer to the end, to work together in some way, because I think that's really when the magic happens. But Tony, tell me, give me some specifics about your work. You talked about the reorg, but what does that actually look like on the ground?
But just to respond to your challenge, we were already talking about follow-up calls backstage. Anyway, so one example from the reorg is our big bet in education. And to pick up from the theme this morning that ASEAN has the promise of being a real economic growth powerhouse in the world, for the Philippines to play a role in that, we need a competitive workforce. Unfortunately, we're experiencing a learning crisis right now. And so more than 90% of Filipino learners are not reading and are not numerate at grade level. And so we are piloting a digital education program, not for digital education's sake, but for teaching effectiveness. And so we're working with Khan Academy. We're working with the local governments where we're piloting this. And the short of it is, after 12 weeks of the pilot, we've doubled math scores. And the third-party evaluator, the Education Development Center based in Washington and Boston, they told us that this is double the effect size that they usually see in other parts of the world. And so we're now working with the Department of Education and other stakeholders to see how we can scale this in the most impactful way. But again, we really need our workforce to be ready for the next few decades. The Philippines is supposed to be entering its demographic dividend period. And for us to really benefit from that, we need to make sure we're investing in the human resource of the country.
That's fantastic. With such amazing results, such scalable results, which brings me to a question for you, Hari, which is, when you find some successes like this, how do you know if it's scalable across regions, across countries, across continents in Gates's view?
Toughest question. I wish you hadn't asked me that, because you honestly don't know. There is always this reductionist impulse to say, oh, it worked in country A, now let's scale it to other parts of the world. Or sometimes it worked in one part of country A, now let's scale it nationally. And to me, you know, that kind of scale-up approach very rarely works, because you need to understand context. You need to understand from rigorous evaluations what elements of the program worked. And then you need to identify who will be the owners for the scale-up. Unless you have clear answers for all three, the notion of, you know, diffusion or replication does not usually go through. So we do invest, you know, close to 10% of our overall program budgets on evaluations of our work. And very often they reveal news that you don't want to see, which is that, you know, the program wasn't as cost effective as you thought it was, or the results or the effects that you saw were because of a variety of extraneous factors, or sometimes, you know, they just didn't have impact and you have to pull the plug. So for us, the most critical element is having a set of external partners who are not core to the implementation, who can look at the data. And like Tony just mentioned, he had partners from, you know, the US looking at education programs in the Philippines and, you know, really giving you a neutral view of what worked, what did not. So we have partnerships with entities like, you know, the JPAL network of researchers. Increasingly, we've been looking at ways to work with the World Bank and, you know, the ADB and multilateral banks who also have fairly strong evaluation components to dissect programs and tell you what impact, what the cost effectiveness of implementation is, and what the risks to diffusion are before you can actually take things up. Once you have all of these lined up, then you have a meaningful conversation. One of the examples I'll share is, for the last 10 years, India has done a fair bit to develop the digital ID, digital payments, what is now called the India Stack. And one of the most powerful applications of that was the government digitizing payments that go to beneficiaries for a variety of social services. Sounds great, but does it actually work? So Karthik Muralidharan from JPAL actually conducted a very rigorous evaluation of the digitization of India's rural employment work guarantee program. And what that evaluation revealed was, yes, the program worked. It reduced leakage by over 40%. It reduced the effort to collect the payment by over 20%. And most importantly, the program paid for itself 6 times over. So the implementation costs were X. The economic benefits of the program were 6X. Now, having all of that helped both the government of India decide to scale it up nationally. More importantly, it also helped other countries that were thinking about similar issues to say, okay, this is why we think we want to do this. Otherwise, oh, India did something cool. That's not really a compelling argument. But the fact that it helps you reduce leakage, it helps you save money, it helps reduce inefficiencies, that's important. But the challenge is this takes time, it takes investment, and it takes the willingness to accept that sometimes what you want to see may not really be true. So I think that willingness to accept failure is where you've got to lead with. And I don't see enough of that happening in our sector. We get good points for just showing up.
I think humility is a big factor, and but I think that the work that you all are doing there, I think, is also really interesting. I mean, I think part of the issue is, and this gets to you in terms of the banking solution, right? Is we want to build these infrastructures as public infrastructure, and then we also want to ensure that you have the access, but also the usage, but most importantly, the protection. And so those are the things that I think on this journey to financial health that we're all experiencing, is ensuring that even as we invest in these massive national programs, that we're always keeping the customer at the center of the equation. But it's great to hear the impact analysis of this. Tell us, Karen, when you think about the banking levers that you have, talk about how you use them in service of impact.
Oftentimes when people think of philanthropy, the default thinking is how much money are we talking about. But actually, it's about actually mobilizing resources. It's funds, it's expertise, it's networks, just like the ability to convene a group of like-minded people like this. So we, in addition to providing grant funding, we also provide awards. But more importantly, we also do capacity building. We open up our banking networks, our clients, to our social enterprise partners. So over the years, although we've nurtured over 160 social enterprises and supported them through grants, but we're really happy to say that in turn, they have gone on to raise 10x the amount of grants that we have provided. So this is where we also bring our banking muscle to bear, if you will. Yeah. In fact, one of our partners is here in the room, Aniket from Hakdakshak. He started off as a grantee. I don't know if you're here, please wave your hand, Aniket. Yeah. And then, yes, and now he's a program partner and he's doing fabulous work. And he's gone on to kind of, create waves with other foundations, and to really put India on the map.
We also work with them.
Exactly. So it's a very collaborative ecosystem. But I also do want to add just at what Tony and Hari said. Philanthropy is hard work. It's not soft and fuzzy. It requires discipline, it's strategic, it's intentional, and it's very purposeful. So, we have to not only just measure impact, but we have to manage for impact, because we have to account for every peso, every dollar, every rupee that we put in. And until and unless we kind of are able to reframe philanthropy on that more hard-hitting strategic note, I think the ability to kind of scale impact and be sustainable, we won't be able to fully realize that opportunity. So another area that the DBS Foundation is looking at is on aging societies. I think Malaysia is still quite young, but many other markets in Asia are fast aging. And although India is relatively younger, but the numbers itself are staggering. And so how do we as a society think about how we can enable everyone to age with dignity, purpose, and joy? It's not waiting till you're 60 and above to worry about it. So how do we as philanthropists, as corporates, as the public sector and the private sector, think about preparing for health from a physical health point of view, a mental health point of view, a social health point of view, and last but not least, financial health. So it's looking at things in totality, building communities of support, and because philanthropy isn't about giving, it's about living. And therefore, we need to look at life in totality.
And you heard Chimon say, you know, the succession planning started at 50 with the second prime minister. So you got to leave enough time to actually build. I'm going to give you the last word, Tony. If you have one message for our audience today, because you're going to be hosting us in the Philippines next year, the summit is coming to you. What is your advice and what do you promise from the Philippines when we all show up there next year?
So I think we can operationalize our collaboration more. And so we started here, the conversation, some conversations backstage, but as we move to the field, I think it's really important to talk to our partners and come to agreement on a few things. One, do we have a shared vision? Really? I mean, do we imagine the same state in 5, in 10 years for the community we're working for? Two, are we talking about the same community? Because a lot of organizations say they're working collaboratively, but actually the communities are kilometers away from each other. Are we talking about the same households? You said we have to be customer or partner-centric. So we got to know them by name, we got to know them by address. And third, do we have a shared evaluation framework where we can say we contribute to it and are all sort of bringing different pieces of the puzzle to make that development equation happen. So thanks.
That's fantastic. Ladies and gentlemen, please give it up for Tony, Hari, and Karen. Effective philanthropy. Make strategic choices. Thank you all.